I still always think selection is the most important thing. Skills are really a close second, but anybody could get on and throw on Crazy in Love or Soulja Boy or Calvin Harris and Rihanna at a party and just like watch the floor fill. Now, where you get by song 2, 3, 4, 5 is a different story.
I'm Justin J, and this is The Plug. There was a time not that long ago when kids dreamed of being astronauts, ball players, maybe even a fireman. But these days, you'll often hear kids say they want to be a YouTuber, a social media influencer, or a DJ. But for today's guest, being a gigging DJ in 1990s New York City wasn't about headlining festivals, smoke cannons, or million-dollar sets. It was hauling milk crates full of records all over the city, battling sketchy sound systems, and enduring the often thankless, relentless hustle that, as he puts it, made him feel like Billy Joel's Piano Man, but in Air Max 90s. He eventually would become one of the most successful music producers of the past 2 decades, working with Amy Winehouse, Lady Gaga, Adele, Dua Lipa, Paul McCartney, and co-writing Bruno Mars' Uptown Funk, one of the most iconic hits of the 21st century. In his new book, Night People, he looks back on the years he spent in sweaty DJ booths, mastering how to read a room and move the crowd. But the book also doubles as a love letter to a New York City that doesn't quite exist anymore, a grittier, unpolished period during hip-hop's golden era. So how far can the privilege of having a family in the music business carry you, and how much of success comes down to blind dedication, hard work, and years of experience? We'll find out as we sit down for a conversation with a man who's helped shape modern music, from behind the decks to in the studio. Today, DJ, producer, author, and the proverbial 20-year overnight success, Mr. Mark Ronson. All right. Mark Ronson, thanks for sitting down, man. Super appreciate you taking time out.
Of course.
First off, I just want to give you a huge congratulations on your book, Night People. I ended up reading it basically in a weekend. And, for somebody who grew up in New York City and a fan of hip hop, it really captures the texture of the city and how much the culture has changed since then. So I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, I think it was a little, it's funny, like you spend so much time on something, it was 3 years, and it really you do start to think why did I write this? What did I need to do? I mean, there's very obvious sort of drivers, it's dedicated to 2 DJs who I was really close with, Blue Gems and DJ AM. And so Blue Gems was someone I used to, I knew since the early 90s, the rave days. And I was about to DJ his birthday party. He had passed away, but they were throwing him at Leban a birthday on what would have been his whatever birthday. And I was DJing with Eli Escobar. And I was just sitting around looking at all my records in my library, and all of them are conjuring these memories, and just thinking man, all these stories, and they're all fading from my head. And kids coming up to me man, you were in New York in the 90s? Nobody in the 90s thought the 90s felt iconic. I mean, we all thought Area and Danceteria and the Roxy and Mars. We were all looking to the 80s and 70s. So yeah, it's weird. I didn't really set out to write a then versus now or Serato versus vinyl or any of these things, but they found their way into the book, as well as a lot of other personal things. And yeah, I guess it was something I had to do, a road that I had to go down, and that's what it is.
Well, I mean, you got to experience so many transformations in New York City nightlife, and you talk about in the book that in just a few short years, it went from Soul Kitchen to Disco 2000 to bottle service and life. And, Night People really does a great job of capturing the vibe of an era where all kinds of people and scenes collided, and things weren't as commercialized and stratified as they are now.
Yeah.
What was it about nightlife in New York City at that time that made you want to be a DJ?
Well, it was the music at first that made me want to be a DJ for sure, because I played in a bunch of high school bands. We weren't incredible, but we got on gigs at, Giant Step gig for the New Music Seminar, opening for Edo G, or playing at the Wetlands at an all ages show, opening for Spin Doctors or whatever, the little kind of mini, certainly felt like highlights to us. But then our band was influenced by Living Color and 24/7 Spies and, even the Black Crows. And I got super into hip hop. I mean, I'd always listened to the Beastie Boys and Public Enemy and LL Cool J, the things that a lot of white kids with the broad knowledge of hip hop knew. But then I heard Pete Rock and CL Smooth and Black Moon and things like that. And so I just fell so hard for this music. I certainly wasn't a rapper. I knew nothing about making beats. I was like, okay, DJing is this one sort of forum that I can show my appreciation for this. And so that's kind of how I got into it. And one night out at this rave, while I was off my face on acid or ecstasy, I saw this DJ named Ani. I just saw what he was doing with two turntables and how he just took a room hostage with the energy, and how he was playing Double X Posse, You're Not Gonna Be Able to Do It, into Gangstar Dwick, and just being holy shit. So that's how I got into DJing. And then it just happened that it was this time in New York where you had this sort of lawless, amazing sort of melting pot energy of the super clubs like Limelight, Palladium, Tunnel, Club USA, and you had these great off the beaten path, hole in the wall hip hop clubs. So yes, so that's where I kind of started. I mean, as well as college parties and fucking bars and wherever they would have me. And then by the end of it, you're right, we're in the late 90s. We're in the bottle service world of clubs like Life and Spy Bar, and with Jay-Z and Damon Dash and Puff and Chris Rock and Mariah Carey all hanging out. So it does sort of traverse this path. And this editor that I worked with at the end, she works for the New Yorker, and she's amazing. And she was like, you can't just say clubs closed or this went. Give me cultural context for New York. Tell me how Giuliani's club policy closed these clubs, and explain bottle service. So she really made me put that sort of deeper layer in, not just to say and then I ended up here and then I ended up here. It's but why? What was happening in New York that led to this? So yeah, it takes you through that thing.
I guess let's start on a macro level. I want to get an idea philosophically of what you feel your role as a DJ is. Because in an ideal situation, you're playing music to like-minded people, or at least people that are receptive to what you perceive as objectively a great track or the right track for that moment. But when that's not the case, and do you feel that it's your responsibility to kind of meet the people where they are and give them what they want to hear, even if what they want to hear is Gangnam Style or Sweet Caroline or something ridiculous? I mean, I guess my question is, do you have a game plan or a strategy when you set out for a set every night? And if so, how often do you have to adapt, and how far are you willing to go to please a room?
Well, the DJ that I was in the 90s and the DJ I am now is a little bit different. So if we're talking about in the 90s, by the end of it, I was playing 5 nights a week. I was kind of like the guy in New York. And, also it was kind of magical because the most popular music was arguably the best, right? The biggest songs of that era, Biggie, Jay-Z, Lauryn Hill. It's Stardust, Music Sounds Better With You. It's these were the songs that were killing New York clubs. So I didn't feel like I had to play a lot of bullshit. But at the same time, I did have this thing, I had lines that I wouldn't cross, of course. I wasn't playing
the Macarena or something.
Yeah, or whatever was the equivalent of that in that day. But I also had this, and I go into it in the book a little bit, I had this compulsion to have to throttle the dance floor. I would walk into a room. There was this one gig that I write about in the book. I'm playing at the Manhattan Center, and it was some Broadway opening, and that was my rent gigs at that time, maybe $2,000 to play some thing for a bunch of stuffed shirts. But a bunch of my friends would look at that crowd and rolled their eyes or been oh, there's fucking our boy taking the check. But I had this weird thing, I had to go into and be able to win over, and not only just win them over, but beat them into submission. Like I wasn't happy till they were like drenched in sweat. There was this sort of compulsion. Of course, there's this ego stroke of watching yourself. It's like, you know, bringing someone to orgasm or something. Like, of course, it's wonderful, but it's also the ego and the validation. So it was that. Now is a little different. In some ways, maybe I'm a more powerful DJ because I have like songs that people know, and I can like go into rooms and sort of not coast, but I can get by a little bit on the records I made and who quote unquote Mark Ronson is. But I think I was a better DJ back then because I was so in it. And when you're playing 5 nights a week and you're going out other nights to see other DJs and you're just in it, like nothing really beats that.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you talk in the book about this particular satisfaction that comes from having to really earn the crowd track by track, you know, and I imagine, you know, like what you talked about, that challenge, it doesn't quite happen for you as often now. It's similar to a stand-up comic who does a random set at a club versus playing a stadium show. Like people are there to see a specific person. And I get the idea, people are there to see Mark Ronson at this point, which probably comes with its own expectations. I mean, if you don't play Uptown Funk, the crowd's going to revolt. You know? But do you sometimes miss the thrill of potentially bombing? I mean, was that a driving force?
I feel like I bomb now more than I did back then.
Really?
I mean, it's rare that I bomb. Well, when I think that I bomb as well, just to be clear, like most people, I'm my own toughest critic, so I'll leave and be like, that was the worst gig ever. And my friend would be like, what are you talking about? It was incredible. But like, it's never as bad as I think it is. I would say I was less likely to bomb back then because I was such a well-oiled machine. I could kind of go into any room, and it's a bit like the Terminator. You sort of like just scan the bodies and you see like what's going to fucking take them there. I would occasionally go to like Paris or somewhere I'd never played before to play for the first time. And I remember actually going to Paris to play some party it was a Gucci party, and going there and buying all this like French touch and French house and disco because I was like, I'm going to go play like all this stuff that I think they want to hear. And I just bombed. And then I played like the first hip hop record and people rushed the floor. It was all, so there's this thing that I always realized, like a crowd can tell what's innately you. A crowd can tell like when you're lying, essentially by the music that you're playing or when you're playing what you know. I think about that quite a lot, actually. But yeah, in some ways when I play now, stakes are higher. It's like, oh man, we went to see fucking Mark Ronson and it wasn't amazing. Like, but this, I don't know. I just always have this drive to overperform.
Well, we had on Randall Poster on the podcast recently, and for the listeners who may not know who he is, he's an extremely accomplished and successful music supervisor, and he's worked with Richard Linklater and Martin Scorsese and did all the music for the Wes Anderson films.
Yeah.
And he had this great line in the podcast, and he said, like, everybody thinks they have great taste in music, and as a result, a lot of those people also think that, hey, I could be a great music supervisor. When, you know, the fact of the matter is there's so many elements to his skill set and his success behind the scenes that people just aren't aware of. And on that same token, I think there's a lot of people with a Spotify account and a laptop who think they can be a great DJ. And one of my favorite parts about your book is how you break down some of these unwritten rules of how to build a set. You know, you talk about, for instance, if you're an opening DJ, you can't play any hits, you know, and only B-sides. And you can't play a banger to an empty room, no repeats. And, you know, some of these rules, they might seem kind of silly or arbitrary, but they really do make a difference. And talk to me about what the average person with an iPhone and a playlist doesn't understand about what makes a great DJ, about what you do.
I think, honestly, like, I still always think selection is the most important thing. Skills are really a close second. Can't be train wrecking mixes left and right. But anybody could get on and throw on Crazy in Love or Soulja Boy or Calvin Harris and Rihanna at a party and just like watch the floor fill. Now, where you get by song 2, 3, 4, 5 is a different story. But and at the same time, like, is it a DJ I want to go see? Probably not. But I do think that there's like a democratization of DJing through laptops and iPads or iPhones or whatever. That's totally fine. I'm not against that. The DJs that I love, what makes them special, the Ellie Escobars or the Clark Kent's or Stretcher Armstrong's. There's obviously incredible selection. There's skills. There's deep knowledge of music. There is bravery. There's surprises. There's things I'm not expecting. That was one of the great things to DJing. And I didn't really find that until maybe the late 90s. But when I started off, I was just playing mainly hip hop, disco, reggae, and then I started be like, whoa, I wonder if I could sneak AC/DC in there, but like hardcore hip hop parties and stuff, and just figuring out the way to like bring it in some way, like in what the little medley would to get to that wasn't going to get a bottle thrown at the booth. But the DJs that I love particularly have that skill set.
And there's a great line in the book. You talked about the formula was simple. Wait for a line in the song that everybody knows, duck the volume, let the crowd sing the line, drop an even bigger hit.
Yeah.
That's a career's worth of knowledge in one sentence.
Right. I get that was a very popular style at the day, and it kind of shows who I am as a DJ. It's like gluttonous, like just wanting to bring the crowd higher and higher because, they have fantastic DJs that, house DJs, techno DJs, Carl Cox, these kind of long blends. But the style of hip hop at that time was really like bang, 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 bang. And if you could keep surprising, again, you would get the element of surprise in that, You have like back in the day, one of the biggest songs was Dwick by Gangstar. You have the line, I said, eeny, meeny, miny, mo, I wreck like pimp. And you have like the whole crowd saying, I wreck the mic like a pimp, do, 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 do. That was like into Gin and Juice, like on the beat, these surprise mixes, and you're remixing the crowd. Those were really big things. And Stretch kind of pioneered that. And I heard Max Glazer, another DJ from the era who I really love and rate, say that it was really clever because a lot of the white DJs certainly back then didn't get on the mic because our voices just sound fucking awful. And so sometimes like Stretch started that thing of like by ducking the volume, having the crowd sing for you, you're basically making the crowd do what the DJ would usually do on the mic. And then you can do all these kind of surprises and tricks and drop records. And yeah, it was a really fun, exciting way to just keep lifting the crowd. You have like 6 of those surprise drop records, crowd singing in a row, and the crowd is just like, they're just a sweaty mess melting in the palm of your hand.
You talk a lot about the parallels between being a DJ and a stand-up comic in terms of rhythm and timing and maybe that need for validation, or sometimes ruminating on that one person in the room that didn't laugh at your joke or didn't rush to the dance floor when you put that record on. And, the difference between killing and bombing, it seems like it's very elusive, even if you're sometimes playing an identical set as you played the night before. But the ability to kind of adapt in real time and read the room and change course, is that like a fundamental skill of a great DJ? Is that what kind of makes the difference?
Yes, you absolutely have to be able to read the room. You could play a set that killed and then go in the next night, and if you just do that on autopilot, you could completely bomb. So there is that thing of like constantly shifting and reacting to what's going on. And I'm certainly guilty, especially now, at times of just like going through an autopilot set just because like, okay, I know I'll open with Valerie into Uptown Funk into Dance the Night from Barbie or whatever, and know that there's a pretty good chance that I'll get them. But sometimes if you start that and you're just doing that without even kind of looking up the crowd, there's something else going on that you're missing, So being connected and being attuned to the crowd is tantamount,
And that's something you don't get from playing songs on your iPod. I mean, you really have to be on stage learning and failing and kind of honing that skill.
Yeah, I think so. I mean, it's like anything. Like you have to be out. You have to be like in the people. Like if you want to be a DJ, it's completely the relationship between you and the crowd and how well that you can sort of like link to that.
I want to get your perspective on what it was like to be a DJ in the 90s, because I think there are a lot of younger people who have a very different perspective of what that means. I mean, DJs didn't used to headline festivals.
Right.
They didn't used to play to 100,000 people. They didn't used to make $1 million a set and have volcanoes and CO2 cannons and stuff like that. And, you talked about even one club that you played in where the booth was actually facing a brick wall.
Yes.
And you had this great line. You said you felt like you were Billy Joel's Piano Man in Air Max 90s. You know what I mean? And DJs weren't celebrities back then. I mean, you were kind of the invisible man behind the party. Is that a fair assessment?
Definitely. I mean, you had like big DJs, sure, like at Funkmaster Flex at Mecca at the Tunnel on a Sunday. Of course, he was one of the biggest musical figures in New York, and the booth was situated in a way that like everybody saw him. You knew it was Funk Flex. But most of the parties, like, okay, Stretch was definitely downtown famous. By the end of the 90s, I was downtown famous. People would kind of nod to you in the booth and be excited you were playing. But no, it wasn't about that. No one was facing the booth. People were facing each other dancing. The turntables might be in the corner somewhere. You know, early gigs I had, we had to bring our own turntables and set them up at the end of the bar. And then you're right in front of the espresso machine. The dude's coming through making espressos. So you're like clutching the bar to make yourself as skinny as possible. Yeah. And I enjoyed that. I feel like Dana Carvey in that Saturday Night Live sketch, he was like, I was young, we walked it, uphill both ways, and we liked it. But I did like it. I liked the anonymity. And when DJing became a bit more of a thing on stage, facing people facing you, I didn't really know what to do with myself. I'm not like a very extroverted person. I'm not a performer. I thought it was kind of weird.
Has that change in the norm affected how you DJ today?
What I found myself doing is like doing a lot of complicated mixes and blends and things on stage. So I would be busy enough with my hands that I wouldn't have to stand around for a while. I remember when I started doing Silk City with Diplo, he was like, we're going to play songs for 3 or 4 minutes. So you're just going to have to get used to kind of standing around in between songs. I was like, I understood what he meant, but it just sounded so terrifying to me because obviously that's what happens in dance music. I mean, obviously you're working the whole time, you're dancing, you're blending. But I mean,
if you did that in 1995, people wouldn't stand and look at you for those 3 minutes. But do you find that today that's kind of what they do? You're the center of attention?
I think it's definitely for the first few songs, and then I really try and get them to turn to each other. And I'm psyched that they're there to see me. Don't get me wrong. Like if they're there and they want to look, that's also fine. But I also very much encourage turning to each other and dancing. I think that, at the really big clubs, and I talk about this a lot, like Roxy, Tunnel, sure, those places had superstar DJs who were mostly house DJs and techno DJs in that era. And people would come and revel at their throne or whatever you want to call it. But for the clubs that we played in, most of the stuff, you were kind of just a little off to the side. It didn't matter if people could see you or not. As long as you had a clear view of the dance floor, it was fine.
There seems to be this knee-jerk reaction today to be dismissive of people who come from a place with privilege. And, in some cases, rightfully so. But one of the things I really liked about this book is how you really confronted head-on Malcolm Gladwell's myth of the self-made man, or the myth of the self-made success. And you're very forthright about your privilege, how in some cases you kind of got to jump to the front of the line, so to speak. I mean, your mom bought you a full DJ set. Your dad had a full studio that you had access to. And, although that's all true, I feel like the theme of your book is really about you willing to put in the work. And it's ultimately a chronicle, not just of your tenacity and your work ethic, but also just how unglamorous and how isolating and thankless the first several years of your career was.
Right.
Is that a fair assessment?
Yes, I absolutely did have many opportunities because of my privilege and my mom getting me turntables, my stepdad being a musician. And I thought it was important to just be really upfront about that from the beginning, and then also be really upfront about the work that I put in. So yeah, that was kind of the point. I mean, I think that the life of a gigging DJ is this sort of, like, I'm not talking about superstar DJs. I'm not talking necessarily just about like a wedding or bar mitzvah DJ, but just that in-between thing. And I actually played plenty of weddings and bar mitzvahs, so there's nothing against that. Like, it is incredibly unglamorous. There's all these highs because you could be in these fancy places DJing for these fucking fancy people. But at the end of the night, there's usually 3 people left in the place when the lights come on and you have to go home, and you're schlepping your records up fucking 2 flights of stairs into a taxi, and most often going home alone. You're like the drummer in the band. It takes you the longest to break your shit down. So it was that. And I wanted to, I obviously had a unique experience. I'm not expecting it was the same for every DJ, but I wanted to talk about some of those psychological highs and lows and that thing of being a DJ. And it's so different for everybody. You know, you could get into DJing because you love the music. You could get into it because you're a party animal. You want to be out. You're fucking, you know, do you like the ego stroke of it? It's not ever going to be the same for everybody, but I just thought that it would be interesting to explore a little bit beyond just like, I go to the club with my crates and I rock it and I go home.
Yeah, I mean, it really reads in this book that although you did start from a place of privilege, like you still earned it. You put in the reps, you know, and it wasn't an easy ride, and it wasn't glamorous and full of fame and success straight from the beginning.
Yeah. And then even where the book ends, you know, I just wanted to make it about the 90s. So I didn't get into anything about, obviously, things like working with Amy Winehouse and Lady Gaga and Bruno Mars that probably some people would be excited to read about. Where the book ends, I sort of, you know, I've been celebrated as this, on the cover of New York Magazine, as like the kind of whatever, this it DJ of downtown. And then I had a lot of lows after that too. My first record came out and tanked, and it wasn't really until I met Amy in 2006 that career started to, you know, blossom. And even after that, there were lows. So I feel like the highs and lows are just, they've been there through the whole, it wasn't like once I made it in 98, then it was like smooth sailing, you know?
Yeah. The one thing that was really interesting about your record collection is that you talked about when you first started DJing, you weren't really digging in the crates to try and find your own new super obscure records and breaks.
Yeah.
You were actually kind of searching for the same records that producers like Q-Tip and DJ Premier and Pete Rock had already used in these like iconic hip hop tracks. And this is all pre-eBay. So it took a lot of time and effort to find those records. And I'm wondering, it felt almost like you viewed the process as this like unofficial curriculum of hip hop that you were trying to immerse yourself in. I mean, so when you set out to acquire all these records for your collection, was there a purpose beyond just having these songs in your arsenal for a set? I mean, did you see it almost as a form of paying your dues or self-education?
Yes, I think it was probably a lot of those things. And I really loved, like, I think of, okay, so Pete Rock and CL Smooth, They Reminisce Over You, which to many people is like, it's really a classic of that era and was the song that really made me want to become a DJ. It was one of them. It was so hard to find those breaks back then. I don't even know if I knew that it was a sample of a song by Tom Scott. And then I get to Vassar and I meet this kid, Ben Velez, who knows all about rare breaks, and he plays it for me. And I'm just like, oh my God, like, this is great. There's a song that I love so much. And then here's its DNA. So I think for some reason, it's, in some simple terms, like, I love the music in this hip hop record, so of course I'm going to love the music in this original, so I needed to have it. I think as well, I loved in my sets playing the original breaks because it's like you're just like lifting the lid or pulling the, you know, the curtains back. It's like there's something about hearing a crowd. Like when the Busta Rhymes song "Put Your Hands Where My Eyes Could See" was the biggest song in New York. I remember the first time I played the original sample Seals and Crofts in the club, and at first it starts with this weird like drone, and everyone's like, "What the fuck is it doing?" And then you start to hear chung 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 start to come in, and then people lose their minds, and then you drop Busta. So there were all these things, and even though I was only like really a beginning producer at that time, like I actually didn't get a drum machine or a sampler till a little bit later. It's funny to think, yes, you were going around spending all this money or whatever money you had on breaks that people already sampled. Like, it's backwards. Like, why don't you find new shit so you can make records? But I loved having these records. I loved the Tribe Called Quest song Vibes and stuff so much that, like, when I first heard Grant Green Down Here on the Ground, like, I was like, oh my God, like, it made my head spin.
I mean, it also speaks to that theme that we were talking about of you willing to put in the effort and do the reps and build the foundation of like what you should know as a hip hop DJ.
Mm-hmm.
You know, you talked about digital versus analog. You know, I guess from a listener standpoint, it's a discussion that's pretty much subjective and kind of a tired argument. From a DJ standpoint, you know, the difference between vinyl versus digital or Serato, there's a massive distinction, you know, and the fact that you had to choose 2 crates each night before your set rather than being incapacitated by an unlimited amount of choices. Do you feel that really informed your approach and your style as a DJ?
Yes, I mean, it was such a different kettle of fish. And just to be clear, like when Serato came out, I remember DJ Am calling me like sometime in 2005 or early 2006, and we would always call each other on the way to gigs if we were having like a total personality or crisis of confidence. Like, I can't believe it. I don't want to play any more of these fucking records. Like, I'm so sick to death of doing these same routines and these things, and I'm a fraud and whatever else. So we would always call each other that thing. I remember him one time like really calling me like, Mark, I don't know what to do. Like, this shit is just like, I can't do this anymore. And then Serato came out and it just opened up this incredible, like, just thing of creativity and just what he could suddenly do and these amazing, routines and things that it birthed with him. And he really was very much the GOAT in all those things. He birthed an entire kind of DJing. At the same time, yes, in the vinyl era, sitting on the floor of my fucking little entryway to my apartment, looking through 3,000 records, putting together my set for the night, really made a difference when I got to the club because I had already thought so much about it. Like, in a sort of like, it sounds a little hokey, but like in some ways I'd already connected with that crowd because I had already been thinking about them, even they're fucking imaginary in my head. Like, what are they going to go for? What after Shaka Khan? I'm going to play New Shoes, like all these things. So you're going there like almost, it's like your warm up before a marathon or whatever it is.
Yeah. I mean, even the physicality that you described of the logistics of how you had to get your records out of your apartment, put one crate and I don't know, you like held the elevator open, or held the door open. And it was like, it was a process.
Yeah. It was weird. If I was by myself taking those 3 crates, it really was like that old riddle, like the farmer has a fox, a chicken, and a bag of grain. He has to get them like across the lake without the fox eating the chicken and blah, blah, blah. And he's only got room for 2 of them. And it was like I had 3 crates. I'd have to take and put one in my apartment door, then take the second one, put in the elevator door, hope that it didn't like close because the elevator door was fucking crazy in my building. Go back for the third one, put it in the elevator, go back for the second one in the apartment door, blah, blah, blah. So it really was a thing. Like by the time you'd even just got to the club, you'd kind of earned your money. But, the other night I played at, because the book has sort of inspired me to just be playing vinyl again, at least for like this little time around until, while the book is really percolating my brain. And again, like I played this party for Giant Step, this anniversary last week, and Giant Step was this seminal New York night that I used to sneak into, and so great. And I had to like think about my records so much because I only wanted to take a crate. I was by myself, and the first song, the whole set had intention to it, and I could tell like it came across, and records were skipping, and I fucking fucked up my back trying to carry them up the staircase on the way out because it's in a basement. But it's just, yeah, maybe it's me just reconnecting with this time. Maybe I'm having a midlife crisis. I'm just need to be reliving this time when I was 23 years old and sort of at my best at this one technique. But yeah.
Yeah, I mean, there's something ethereal about the analog experience. Like even as a photographer, I mean, it's undeniable that digital has an immense amount of advantages, but there's something about the intentionality of having to push this button. It costs basically $1, and then you got to wait 24 to 72 hours to see what you've created. Like it creates a different experience. You think about things differently.
I mean, I probably played Soulja Boy 3 or 4 times in the past 20 years from the digital era, whenever that song came out, 2007, 2008. I probably played it 20 times in the past 2 months because to me, it's like just to play Soulja Boy, maybe a song that's like reached this level where it's almost like, just a wedding jock jam or something. To play it off the laptop, I guess anybody could do that. But to actually pull it out and have it on vinyl and play, it's like, oh, now it has intention. This is meaningful. He brought it all the way from home. Records that I even had on vinyl back in the day, like Kia, My Neck, My Back, like that I played to death on vinyl. It's funny to see like kids when I play that now are just like, whoa, I've never seen that on vinyl before. It's like, this was a huge record in 98. Every DJ was playing it on vinyl. But it's just so interesting. And also, I'm not like A-Track or, the crazy routines or AM, but just playing my, chaotic ballet of vinyls, I like to call it, like turning records off, dropping them on beat, 8 bars each. Kids are just like watching. It's because they've just never seen anything like it before, and it is something sort of, it does make the whole thing, it adds a sense of ceremony to it.
Well, I want to talk a little bit more about like technique, because there was a point in your career where you knew the classics, you could read a room, you were a solid working DJ, but you start to encounter like a different kind of DJ, like these people with insane technical skills and scratching ability and mixing live and doing things on 2 turntables that, it felt like wizardry to you.
Yeah.
Was there ever a conflict in the DJ scene at the time between taste versus technique, or curator versus performer? How did those two schools fit together?
Well, you had DJs like Stretch Armstrong, who had serious skills, and like you listened on the radio, and he was doing really cool tricks with 2 records, doubles of the same record and stuff. But in the club, he played pretty like minimal of those cuts and stuff, because people don't really want to hear that in the club, and it's just like, you could tell, you go watch a Stretch set, you can tell he definitely had skills and everything was fucking clean as hell, but there wasn't a lot of like rocking doubles. Then there were DJs like Funkmaster Flex and Kid Capri who were like really exciting on the mic. So they were rocking doubles, but they were like on the mic with it, and it was still elevating the party. And then you had AM come along, and it really did turn into a performance. And somehow he found this incredible median that you could do these crazy routines and these crazy blends with insane scratching, have people have this like 30-second moment of like watching and be like, holy shit, and then drop something so big that then everybody would go back to dancing and like be back in the thing. So he was really the one that, and other DJs, like all the DJs like came to watch him play in the beginning, because it was just this like, holy shit. And then you have these great DJs who sort of come from the lineage of AM, the DJ Spiders and stuff. So he really did birth this thing as far as club DJs went. That he found that medium, but like I was never gonna have those skills. Like I was never gonna have that wizardry. So so I just kind of was like, all right, well, my cuts are always going to be this level of like 1995 remedial, and that's where I'm going to stay.
But I mean, there was a point in the book where you kind of realized you needed to level up a little bit to match them, and I guess what I found fascinating is it unlocked new possibilities for you, because you talked about before, suddenly you could break these conventional rules and you could play AC/DC, or you could play Duran Duran in a hip hop set because you knew how to seamlessly beat match them, right, instead of just fading in and out. I mean, and those kind of genre flips are very common these days, but at the time, was that a real eureka moment for you?
Yes, absolutely. I remember, and I write about it in the book, the first time I dropped AC/DC at this club called Cheetah on a Monday night, which was like the big downtown hip-hop party, like except for maybe Mecca at the Tunnel on Sunday, which was like 3,000 people. This was the place. It was Missy, Mike Tyson, Janet Jackson, Prince, Mace, Aaliyah, everybody came through here. And the regular DJ Jules, I would fill in for him occasionally. He was amazing. He had impeccable taste. He played the best hip-hop, R&B, dance hall, that kind of stuff. But there was nothing like, certainly anything like AC/DC or whatever. And I just remember like, yeah, thinking like, how can I fucking play this without getting myself fired or ending my career, you know? And I realized at the time I worked out this mix and this thing of how I was going to get to A to B, and dropped it, and it was incredibly...
And it worked.
Euphoric, and it worked. And at that moment, I was like, all right. It wasn't like I was some diehard like rock and roll kid that was just like, now I get to like play what I really like. But I liked surprising people and playing good music and getting away with it. And that's really how I got my first production gig for this girl, Nika Costa, because Dominic Trenier, who was this brilliant manager who managed D'Angelo and Nika Costa and some other people, would come to my DJ sets. He was like, yo, I don't know if he had this amazing raspy voice. I don't know if you make beats or whatever, but like I got this white chick who sings, and like I just want her album to sound like one of your sets, you know, EBMD, Biggie, AC/DC, Shaka Khan, and Rufus. I mixed all those things together, and AM was doing the same thing on the West Coast, and we shared a lot of tricks and routines. And, you know, even though he had technically could wipe me under the table, whatever the expression is, it was a new thing. It was a new thing in New York, and it was exciting to be at like a club like Lotus and see.
It seemed like it was a new thing just in culture in general. Like genres were so much more siloed back then than they are today.
Yeah, they didn't. There was no thing for mashups yet. There was no name for it. When all those first run of mashups came that were in the early '90s, everyone went crazy for. I wouldn't say New York DJs were like salty, but it was like, yeah, we've been doing this the whole time. It's called blends. You put an acapella over it, drum beat, and that's kind of it. You know, there was some cute, clever things that happened. I remember the one D12 Purple Pills over Just Can't Get Enough by Depeche Mode, but they were musically gratifying, a little guilty pleasure-ish, but like, you know, we were playing AC/DC Anti Up a cappella over a Whole Lot of Love Break or something by Led Zepp. So yeah, that was the thing. We were trying to, I think at that point I'd been playing and living on a steady diet of hip hop, R&B, dancehall, and funk for 6 years. And I was like, what else can I do?
You know, it always fascinates me how music producers can work across such wildly different genres. You know, like Rick Rubin, for instance, producing both Slayer and Adele, or the Beastie Boys and Johnny Cash. And, you know, and that kind of creative range is always something that really amazes me. And you had a few moments like that in your career. I mean, you know, one of my favorite albums that you produced is Arabia Mountain by Black Lips. And it's such a like great, raw, chaotic garage rock feel. And it feels almost like it's from a different era, you know? And then on that same spectrum, you have, you know, the polished funk of Bruno Mars or the mainstream pop of Barbie. Is there a through line between any of those projects as a producer, or do they just kind of represent your interests at that point in your life?
Yeah, I love all that shit. I love the Black Lips. I love Dua Lipa and Bruno and George Clinton and all of it. So yeah, and I think there's been times where I've like probably arguably stretched myself a bit too far, like went a little too left or maybe out of my comfort zone. But I like all these things. I grew up listening to all these things. It would be, it would be impossible for me to say no anyway. And I had a fucking blast making Arabia Mountain with the Black Lips. I mean, I nearly died because I had to go to the hospital. I had like get my stomach pumped because these guys just are completely reckless with their bodies. And they took me out to eat sushi, and we had raw liver. I was like liver sushi. Like, there's no such thing as liver sushi. It's just raw liver. And I just like remember like for 2 days. One day I was in the hospital. 2 days I was down for the count.
Wow.
But
was it a prank? Did they eat it too?
No, they ate it too. But they just were like, their stomachs were probably just like fucking made of metal. Yeah, and that's the thing. I think it would be impossible for me to try and just stay with one thing.
But I guess some question is like, where does the skill set transfer to all of those different genres?
I think the skill set, okay, there's certainly like knowledge of the genre because I knew all those things and loved all those pieces, those kinds of music growing up. I'm not going in like, oh, what are we doing here? Like there's that. But I think at the end of the day is like the skill set, certainly in the Rick Rubin school, the skill set of the producer is to like understand the artist and help them get their vision out as strongly as possible. It's not into like go in and get a hit. Sure, it's nice to go in and get a hit. I think that same thing, like when I met Amy Winehouse, which I met her here in this studio, I had never made anything that sounded remotely like Back to Black the first time, but she came and sat down and I was like, well, what do you envision your record sounding like? And she played me the Shangri-Las, and I was like, that's cool. Like, I never made anything like that. And so I was like, well, come back tomorrow. Let me see what I can do tonight. So I sat, and it was literally that piano, and came up with the piano for Back to Black. I was inspired by her. And so I like that. I'm either so inspired by somebody, there's probably still that sense of overachiever. Like, I know I'm not supposed to do this, but I'm going to fucking do it anyway.
Well, in the case of the Black Lips, what do you think they saw or heard in you that they wanted on their album?
Well, I think that they liked Amy, and they heard that same like crusty sort of like 60s production that they were very fond of, although their thing like, you know, is dirtier. And I think they probably liked the fact that they weren't supposed to be working with me, you know, like they like to throw a fucking, you know, finger in the face of expectations of what they should be doing. When I got to work with Josh Homme, who was one of my absolute musical heroes at the time of Queens of Stone Age record, I'm sure he enjoyed it too, because it was like, you're going to work with a fucking Uptown Funk guy? So yeah, I think I work with artists that like to defy whatever's expected of them.
There's a great scene in The Sopranos where Paulie goes back to the old neighborhood and he tries to shake down Starbucks for protection money. And the manager basically says, there's no key on the register for this. I don't know what you want me to do. And Polly has this like kind of real like epiphany that the entire culture of the neighborhood has shifted.
Yeah.
And there's a moment in the book that really reminds me of that. You had been away producing for years. You're a dad. You're not really in the DJ scene anymore. You go to see your good buddy Ellie Escobar play a party in Brooklyn. And you don't feel bitter or depressed about it, but it seems like you have this clear realization that once again, the culture has shifted.
Yeah.
What was that experience like?
I think that the thing is, like, if you're a gigging DJ, which is what this book is about being, like, you can't just like dip out of the scene and come in like once a month and, or once every 2 months and expect to still have your same sea legs, like, sure, if I haven't played in a while and then I call DJ Politic or Ellie or Rashad Hayes or just these, I'd be like, hey, what's popping in these clubs right now? Like, and desperately try and download and listen through things to see what I like. It's like, it's no substitute for being in it. So I don't mind that I'm not in it. I have actually been DJing quite a bit more lately, and I do feel a little bit more like back in my old, whatever, say back in my bag, whatever the fuck it is. But yeah, it's all right to sort of go and be like, this shit's moved on. It's still fucking amazing, but like, I'm not like, I wouldn't jump on these decks right now at this point, at this party. So I think it's just, it's like, the realizations that come with age,
being a dad and just kind of accepting that everybody gets old and you don't have to be the guy in the scene forever. Yeah, and you can't be the guy in the scene forever.
Not if you're doing other different shit and whatever. Like, Ellie's had an incredible trajectory because he's bigger now than he ever was, and he just stayed at it doing the shit that he loved. But yeah, I went and made records and did other stuff, and yeah, it's weird, this thing. So I have been DJing quite a bit around the city and Gabriella's and New Blue, and I love it, but my ears, and I'm hearing the loudest ringing right now. My tinnitus is worse than it's ever been. My back is fucked up. Carrying these records around like I can barely fucking walk. I climb into bed at 2:30, sort of like smelling like the club, and my wife like rolls over for the second half asleep, and she's like, "Oh my God, I fucking married a DJ," and I have to wake up at 6:30 to make pancakes for my daughters, and it's like, I love all of it, but it's like my body is at 49. I can't withstand it in the way that I used to.
There's a great line in your book. You said that if you go to bed at 5 a.m., you always wake up the same day.
Yeah.
It's such a...
Yeah, it's a little bit, it's like Groundhog's Day. It's like, I do feel like that sense of, I was trying to uncover why I was in this. I didn't have any goals, really. I mean, I was so excited to be doing what I love doing, but there's this thing when you work at night, you go to bed at 5 a.m. every day. So it's always the same day when you wake up. So it's easy to sort of get in this Groundhog's Day thing.
Yeah. I just want to get back to one thing you said before. What are some of the lines that you won't cross when you're a DJ, even if it's at a wedding?
Well, there's no Kanye anymore, that's for sure. But nobody's really asking for Kanye. What else? I don't know. If somebody really wants to hear a song, like, I'd never played the Macarena or Mambo No. 5, but I wouldn't have anything against if that was somebody's favorite
Cotton
song.
Head Joe.
Cotton Eye Joe.
Cotton Eye Joe.
Maybe I draw the line there.
Yeah.
That's the line.
Yeah. Well, we always like to end the podcast by asking the guest to plug something that they're not directly involved in that they feel isn't getting enough attention, whether it's a book, a movie, a TV show, an artist, a cause. Is there something that you want to give some shine to that you'd like to talk about?
There's a few books that I read while I was writing, because I found like I actually weirdly never read more than I did while I was writing. There's an incredible book by Dave Hickey called Air Guitar, this series of like pop culture essays. I think Dave Hickey passed away maybe a year or two ago. That's a book that I fell in love with. There's a book by Mary Cantwell called Manhattan When I Was Young. It's just such a beautiful thing that sort of New York becomes a ghost story. All the buildings are sort of haunted, not in some way that's literally ghosts, but just you think of your past lives and all these things. And of course that there was some common thread there with what I was doing. So yeah, those two books I would recommend.
Mark, I want to say, thanks once again for taking the time to sit down. I know you're a busy guy. I loved your book.
I just did the audiobook last week too. Actually, it took 2 weeks to do the audiobook. Holy shit, it's a lot. But I loved it, and yeah.
I really appreciate you sitting down. Everybody go out, check out Night People. If you grew up in New York, you'll recognize something on every page that you remember. If you didn't grow up in New York, it's still an amazing read. And I also want to give a big shout out to Ellie Escobar, because he's really instrumental in putting us together.
Yeah.
And, you know, when someone sticks their neck out and makes an intro, it means a lot. And so I'm so glad we can make this happen. So, you know, thanks, Ellie. I appreciate it.
Night People was the name of the label that Ellie had with Lloyd and Blue Jams, who the book is dedicated to. So I had to ask Ellie for the permission to use it.
Well, hopefully our paths will cross again soon. Super appreciate it.
Great.
Congrats on the book, man.
Awesome, man. Thanks so much.
Thanks for listening, and a huge thanks to today's guest for dropping in. If you enjoyed this episode, do us a favor and take a minute to rate, review, follow, or subscribe. This episode of The Plug contains original theme music by Andrew Van Weingarten and Dan Drohan. Mixing and sound design by Matt Boynton at Ultraviolet Audio, logo and branding by Italic at italic-studio.com, and you can check out my photography at justinj.com. Thanks again, and be sure to check out the archive and tune in for future conversations.